Welcome to the Guitar Freaks Podcast, where we turn beginning guitar players into guitar freaks. This podcast is sponsored by Fret Deck. And now your host, Justin Comstock.
Welcome to the Guitar Freaks Podcast. I'm your host, Justin Comstock. I am very pumped today to have Seth Rosenbloom on the podcast again. What's up, Seth?
How's it going? It's good here.
It's good seeing you again.
Same to you.
I believe it's been 3 years.
That sounds about right. Yeah, at least, if not longer.
It does
Something
not.
like that.
It doesn't feel like 3 years.
Everything's, I feel like that whole 2020, 2021 period just threw off the entire sense of time. Of there's stuff that happened in 2018, 2019 that feels a lot more recent than it was.
Time is a very funny thing, I guess, huh?
Without a doubt.
Well, I've been excited to talk to you again, and you've released a new album by the name of As the Crow Flies.
I did.
It's fantastic. If you haven't listened to it, go download it. What made you choose As the Crow Flies for the album name? Because that's a cover song.
It is. I originally heard that tune. There's the Rory Gallagher version. There's the old Tony Joe White version. I think first that I had heard it way back was the Joe Bonamassa version that he did, and I dug the tune. Had my friend Ryan play slide on it, wanted it to be kind of swampy and that whole thing. The answer for this is going to be half good and half super lame. Of half of it was, unless it was going to be a title for the record that is not one of the songs on the record, it was like, what do I want the album title to be? And you kind of start going through all the song titles, and it's like, no, that's going to be weird. It's like As the Crow Flies. I'm like, that's cool. It's like, could be good album artwork to go with it, could do a lot of things. And I've always found myself using that saying. I think as it's like, usually it's when, as a musician, you're booking gigs and you come across radius clauses and you're looking up how far are those venues apart. Can I do both of them on a run? So yeah, it just I liked it, and it was like that would make a good album title. And
I love it.
Yeah, the artwork came out really well, and was happy with how that came together. Oh, I think you're muted.
Sorry about that. Reading about your album, it sounded like you were able to work with your dad on one of the songs.
Yeah. So
what was that like?
It was cool. I mean, my dad played in all the big Boston orchestras for years. I mean that was my start. It's why I played violin as a kid, and was doing a cover of Can't Trust Your Neighbor, which is a Freddie King tune. There's also a great Johnny Taylor version that has some changes and everything, and is cool. But Freddie King version has strings on it. I was going to do it heavier, but I still wanted strings, and it was kind of a good built-in excuse to have my dad on the record. So it was my dad played violin, kind of arranged the whole thing, brought in a fantastic violist, and they did the strings for it. And it came out really well. It was cool. It was this record, like the last one, had a decent amount of horns, didn't do any horns on this one, did the strings on that, and then a lot of background vocals. But that was kind of the auxiliary stuff. It was trying to, overall, with those few exceptions, keep it closer to the feel of a live show and the instrumentation of one.
Yeah. Sounds like you grew up in a very musical family.
Oh, I did. My parents met in music school. So
did they?
Yeah, my mom was a violinist too. Didn't play professionally past kind of mid-20s or so, but there were a lot of instruments in the house. I mean, tons of violins, violas around, and my mom had a couple classical guitars in the house because she ended up going into early childhood education, teaching preschool, and she'd occasionally, bring in a guitar, I think, to kind of strum songs on there for the, 3, 4, 5-year-olds. So there were a couple guitars around the house, but oh yeah, I mean, I got the classical side of things from my dad. My mom was constantly playing Beatles records, Motown, all that. My grandmother was always playing Elvis stuff, so that was the early stuff for me.
That's awesome. Did you have any siblings that played with you?
I have no siblings at all, so no.
Just you.
Only child.
Yeah,
Only
that's awesome. Just you and mom and dad jamming out. That's awesome. I'm curious because you learned violin. Do you still play violin?
No, I have not. I have not regularly touched a violin since I was about, I don't know, 13 or 14 was the end, and really after about, I'd say 12 was the last time I was doing any serious practicing. I played in a youth orchestra, and then and I only really did that because I was bribed with a new guitar. And after that, it was really kind of game over for that. Had a short stint trying viola, but it was a lost cause. I had heard too many viola jokes to actually be convinced of playing it.
Oh, I love it. That's awesome. No, I do love that Freddie King song. When I saw it on the album, I listened to it, and then I had to go back to the Freddie King song and listen to his version. I'm like, this is so cool.
It's a great one.
It's a good song. There's, I went vinyl shopping last week or maybe 2 weeks ago, and I found an old Freddie King album, Burglar. Such a good album. Oh my gosh.
Fantastic record.
Yeah. Freddie King is the bomb.
He sure is. And on that tune, so the studio we recorded at is owned by a guy in Boston, Milt Reeder, who's a great player. And Susan Tedeschi did a record there way back, but he has an unbelievable studio at his house. It's not a home studio. It's like an addition to the house and pretty insane, but he also has collected gear and did it at the right time. So every single Fender amp ever made, he's got one.
Wow.
There's just every kind of guitar you would want. And he had, the Freddie King album cover where he has the gold top Les Paul,
yes.
Like a wrap tail gold top. And Milt has a great, I think it's either a late 54, I think, wrap tail gold top. And I played it on Can't Trust Your Neighbor because it's like, let's be mildly authentic and play, my Strat was a lot of the stuff, but it's like, I'm not playing a Strat on that Freddie King tune. I want
right.
flavor. I need that growl of humbuckers, or humbuckers, P90s in that, and it was the guitar for the job.
Yeah, those gold tops are pretty sick.
They are usually my favorite Les Pauls, more than, I've played a good number of real bursts, and you give me a good wrap tail gold top, and those things, they're just so raw, and I think being more of a single coil guy, they feel more familiar in a way. Right.
Yeah, that's awesome. I went to Nashville this past year, and I went and stopped by Carter's Vintage Guitars, and I bought me a Les Paul. So there's just something about those Les Pauls, those vintage Les Pauls that have that, like you said, the growly sound. There's just a lot of energy in those types of pickups and the Les Pauls. Are just amazing.
And it's funny, I don't own a single Les Paul.
Really?
I just last week bought only the second Gibson I've ever owned. I had maybe 7-8 years ago now, I had an R8, which was fine. I didn't really bond with it, but I just picked up an old 345, and
I saw the pictures.
Yeah, it's a good one.
Beautiful.
It's a good one from my friends over at Music Emporium up here. But every time I'm in Nashville, it's like you go down, 12th there, and you hit Carter, you hit Rumble Seat, you hit Groon, all on one street. And nowhere has that much good guitar shopping that compact.
It's awesome. Seth, on this album, since we're talking about a lot of the guitars, what was your number one guitar that you recorded with on this album?
My old Strat, my 56 Strat was, yeah. I think that was about 75 to 80% of the record. I mean, we didn't change amps either. Like I knew that I wanted something that I was familiar with and that was kind of my sound on most of it. So had my 2-rock Bloomfield drive and the string driver 410 that I always use, had that in an ISO booth, and then basically auditioned a bunch of different amps because I like doing the 2-amp thing. It's something we did on the last record when Josh Smith was producing, because he's a big fan of doing that often too. And it's funny, like we started off of I love a good tweed bassman. We tried that. It just didn't mesh well with the 2-rock. Tried an old Vibreverb, as I said. Milt has every amp ever made, and actually settled on 59 Tweed Deluxe. Turned to about 9 or 10, so pretty gained up, but it does like the little Marshall thing, and it kind of fills in all the gaps where that 2-rock is so much of the mid-range and just the punch, and then you get a little more of the grind and grit out of the Deluxe. And what I like about doing the 2-amp thing is it's like before you start adding processing, before anything like that, whoever's mixing it, if they want to get a bit of a different flavor, can just balance those 2 amps and often access a lot of different tones that way without going right to any effects on the tracks.
Yeah, because you're basically dealing with 2 sounds that you can kind of get into the mix and really kind of fine-tune your tone. That's fascinating.
Exactly, where it doesn't have to stay 50-50
right
once it hits the record. I mean, I know there was one on the last record where I think a mic kind of acted up on one of the amps and we just dumped that line off of and it sounded great. It changed the tone a bit, but it's like you get a lot of options from doing that, and I like that.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'll have to try that next time I'm in the studio. Get a couple amps. I've always wanted a 2-rock. That's on my list.
They seem to be multiplying here. I just at NAMM picked up my my 3rd. One of the new the vintage deluxe with the 310, because I was doing some West Coast gigs. Walked it right out of NAMM, played those gigs, and now it's back home with me. And it's great. I mean, they're bulletproof and they sound great. And I like reliability, and I like great sounding amps, and they really check all the boxes I look for.
Yeah, that's great. On your album, I kind of want to talk about, kind of shift gears here and talk about your songwriting approach. How do you approach songwriting within the blues format?
It's a great question, and now I'm grappling with that again as I write for the new record, trying to bank a lot of songs here and have some good stuff to choose from. It's tricky because there's that fine balance, right? And like my stuff definitely doesn't sit in the traditional blues camp. There's the soul blues influence. There's some amount of country influence. There's definitely some more of the rock influence. And I am not someone who's good about sitting down and writing every day and just staying on top of it. I am more of, I'm going to write because I'm doing a new record. And I find that where I really run into problems is lyrics. I can find those kind of hooky chord progressions, those melodies, those riffs. But if you look at the liner notes, it's like I do a lot of co-writing for the reason of of lyrics. And often I'll kind of put out the challenge, because it is the thing of, I never want to write a song that doesn't have to be written, in the sense of, like you say, within the blues format. It's the reason why I'll do some cover tunes on records, because it's like, I don't want to write a song just to say I wrote a song. I want to write a song because I have something to say with that song. Right. And it's also that challenge of like, okay, can we write a slow blues that isn't a heartbreak song? That gets challenging. Like, some of the content too, it's easy, I think, to become repetitive, to become kind of stale with it. But I'm always trying to bring something that feels authentic, and also hasn't just been done 7 million times before as well. Even though, when I listen to my stuff, it's clear where some of the influence is coming from.
Right. So it sounds like you take more of a project-based approach to writing, album creating. You write to focus and create an album. You're not writing every day. You're typically just project-based.
More often than not, yes. But then some of the really good songs, it's just you have the thing caught in your head, and it has to come out. Yeah. And I've always found, like, off Keep On Turning and off As the Crow Flies, like, some of the songs have evolved that way. Like, Did You Try to Break My Heart has become kind of the closer for the live shows. It started as the opener, but I like it better as the closing tune. And that was one where I had been playing with kind of that chordal thing, and it's based off just that old school, like, blues descending thing. And then the riff kind of emerged from there. The chorus chords just popped out, and that was one that had been written, or at least started to be written, pretty close back to when I did Keep On Turning, but just wasn't fully fleshed out. Same thing on Keep On Turning, like Right About Now is one that's always in the set. And that's one where had been playing with that chord progression for a long time and just couldn't find the words to go with it, and it all kind of came together. So some of the best just organically evolve, but right. Often then, it's like, okay, got to sit down and write, because if I don't make myself, I sometimes won't.
Right. Speaking of Did You Try to Break My Heart? So I'm guessing you just probably made up a sick riff, because that riff is my favorite riff on the album. I love it. It's just got a good feel to it, and it just vibes really, really great. It's awesome. Writing that song, did you have a co-writer on that song?
On Did You Try to Break My Heart? Yeah. So I brought in the riff was already there. The chorus chords were already there. And I had some of the chorus lyrics. But that was about it. And I had some of the stuff kicking around for quite a while, and that song was actually January 2021 it was written, because it was supposed to have a co-writing session, and it was in the middle of, everyone getting the Omicron COVID wave, and I had gone out to dinner, like 7 of us, everyone starts dropping like flies. I had made it through okay, and then the day of that writing session, get home with like a runny nose, and I'm like, it's probably just that it's cold out. And it's like, nope, COVID, and I felt fine. Dang. So we did it over Zoom, but it was a little less interactive than a normal co-writing session, in the sense of it wasn't the ability to like play together. So I brought that in, and we wrote it in probably an hour and a half, 2 hours over Zoom to finish it. But then, like, some of the cool things with that riff. So like the ba-da-da, kind of that walk up, that's total credit in the arranging. That was Ryan Taylor, who played rhythm guitar on the record. That was him when we were playing around, and it's like a family thing over there because his wife Sonia was the co-writer for it. So yeah.
Okay, awesome. It sounds like you had some pretty awesome players on this album.
I did. Yeah, it was pretty close to just my normal band that I play with most of the time.
Yeah. I was reading some of your notes on your website, and it looks like they played with Curtis Salgado, your pianist. And speaking of the piano, I was listening to your album before you came on, and the piano solo on Blind Eye is spectacular.
Bruce is great, and it's a really nice Steinway they have in that studio. So it was great. He came in and killed it.
It was pretty awesome. And then are you using a Leslie pedal or an actual Leslie effect on the guitar solo?
That was the Leslie pedal. So that, and now I've switched it out on my main board because I had a new board built and wanted some things to be a little more compact. But that's one of the good old Hughes and Kettner rotospheres that are hard to find, but they will do the Leslie thing better than just about anything else. But they're super loud, they're super big, they're a pain to power. Like, everything about them is annoying, but they sound great.
It did sound pretty great. What was it like taking on the producer role for this album?
It's a really good question. I would not have felt confident to do it without doing the last record with Josh Smith producing. I learned so much working with him. I think the other thing that gave me comfort with it is I was working with my band, so they generally know how I'm thinking, and I also know what they're generally going to do in certain situations. But we did more pre-production for this one, had some rehearsals before going into the studio. It wasn't just throw charts in front of everyone, so I was able to kind of tape rehearsals, listen, see what parts I didn't want, because obviously the big difference is we tracked, I'd say 90% of the record was done live off the floor of me, rhythm guitar, bass, and drums all together. So at that point, I'm trying to play my part, and I can't be totally focused on what everyone else is doing
right
in the moment. I have to listen back and then figure it out. But I felt like I had the vision for what I wanted the record to be, that I wanted it to have a very live feel to it. And again, working with Josh kind of gave a lot of the ability to do it. And I was on the phone with him like the day before we went into the studio, and I was like, what would your advice be for me doing this one and producing it myself? And he said, know what you want and basically get it done. Of like, don't just go in and play a shuffle. Know what kind of shuffle, what the parts are, have everything worked out. And it was that attention to detail, and also how he pushed me in ways on the previous record that I give large credit to, of feeling confident to, take that on myself. And it was a comfortable environment. I mean, all the musicians were friends. I'd worked in this studio a decent amount prior, so it was comfortable.
Awesome. That's good. What was the most challenging aspect of being the producer?
I think that one of the things that a lot of musicians deal with in the studio is the thing that anything you put down is going to live on forever. So it's easy to get very perfectionist based in the studio. And sometimes that advantage of having a producer is them saying, just as much as it can be them pushing you, it's often them saying, no, we've got it, let's move on.
I see.
And grappling with that of like, I can do 70 takes, but did I already get the one that should be on the record the third time?
Right.
And having to self-police that's the hardest thing from a less so everyone else's tracks, but my own. So the guitar solos, the vocals, all of that, and just having less of the collaborative side of being able to bounce ideas off someone that also really has that 360-degree view of the project, not just to, someone else in the band or the engineer, but like, yeah, that was different too, but it was a good challenge.
I would imagine it'd be hard, especially if you're doing guitar solos, trying to figure out which one you're gonna keep. And
sort of, but we did most of them live with the band. I mean, I committed before that it's like I care more about the energy of the take
right.
than note for note perfection, because I look to all the records that I like and the ones I really listen to. And it's old Albert King records, it's Stevie Texas Flood, it's stuff like that. And it's like solos weren't overdubbed. They were playing loud in a room, and we had fail safe that a lot of those didn't have. Everything was isolated. So drums in the live room, bass was in an ISO booth, guitar in an ISO booth, and rhythm guitar in an ISO booth. But we were all sitting in a room playing together. So the idea was to get 100% of it off the floor. Did we? No. Probably got 80% and then added, there were times where it needed like a third guitar track. So overdubbed that. Overdubbed the keys just to keep it a little easier in the room. But yeah, that was a main part of it, was committing before of like, I want the energy over the, I could have played that one note cleaner. Right. So what? You can go pick apart all those great records, Zeppelin records. It's like, are they note for note precise? No. Does anyone care? Well, they shouldn't, because they sound awesome. And
they do.
Like, you want it to have the feel, you want it to have the energy. You even go to like all the records I like, early Van Halen records. Yeah. It's the same way. It's like it's the energy more than like the flawlessness that draws it to it.
Right. Well, and a lot of those old blues records, they're just getting up and recording and playing.
Some of my favorite, like the stories from like the Hound Dog Taylor records, where you have the thing where you can tell it was really one mic, and when he moves his head away from the mic, the guitar gets louder because his head isn't blocking the guitar amp as much from the microphone, and it's a thing.
Yeah, there's something about those imperfections in recorded music that add life to it, I think.
Oh, I agree, because I think especially now where everything is going the direction of Pro Tools editing on the grid, comping vocals down to the syllable, where it's like you don't listen to Aretha or Bobby Bland or Johnny Taylor because their pitch was impeccable. I mean, don't get me wrong, it was. But you listen to it because it's a great vocal performance and it makes you feel something. Right. And that's what matters about it.
Absolutely. You mentioned Van Halen, and I remember listening to Women and Children First, and there's parts in there that you can hear everyone in the band talking and just kind of goofing off, and
sure,
everybody wants some. You can hear David Lee Roth just kind of doing whatever he wanted in the background while the band's playing. So there is a life to that. There's an energy to that, especially these old blues records, Howlin' Wolf, Muddy Waters. You just hearing the imperfections in the record almost makes it more enjoyable, to my ears at least, hearing the humanity.
It's that fine line of, you have the thing, and I think it's what the Hendrix quote, where people have copied me so well that they've even copied my mistakes. Of the thing that I hate is when there'll be artists that'll try to copy the mistakes from old records to make it hip. Like, that doesn't do it for me because that's not authentic. You're trying to, but when it's just, this is what it sounds like when you perform it, and it has that energy, like that's what it matters the most of, like, does it really sound like a band playing? Does it sound like something that makes you feel something?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm sure there's an energy in the room when you're recording live, and when you can visually see the other artists in the room. There's just something about that where it just creates a sound and an emotion when you can visually see everyone in the room.
It's that, and it's also like if you overdub a guitar solo, in terms of the arc of the solo and dynamics, you are locked into whatever the band played. Hopefully it's what you actually want, but when you're on a live gig, the most enjoyable thing I think often is that when you take a solo, that band's going to follow you if they're
Right.
half decent. And you get that same thing in the studio then, where dynamics wise there's really that interplay in between the band, and it's not just like, okay, creating this canvas to do whatever you want over it. No, it's taking it and reflecting in the band and in the solo that there's that interplay between soloist and band.
Right. Yeah, it's a beautiful thing to hear. So you mentioned earlier that you're in the process of writing again another album.
Another album.
How far along are you in that process?
Just kind of have a couple songs about ready to go, but yeah, have deadlines on the calendar. So
There we go.
I have some time, but not a ton of time. Of going in mid-October, it looks like, is the plan. So, have the
Wonderful.
next 6 months, and can try to write a lot more than is needed for half the record, track half the record, and then do the same thing again. Probably a couple covers will end up making it, and have some in mind that I'll keep close to the vest for now.
Keep it secret.
But yeah, it's the writing has started, and a new record will come.
I love it. It sounds like you've been playing around a lot in Boston and New York. I've seen you post at the City Winery quite a bit.
Yep, it's been a busy start to the year. Did some Northeast stuff, then did a West Coast swing, and now gearing up early April, doing a little run with my good friend Andy Wood, doing Boston and New York, and then we're soon to be announced we'll have a little kind of mid-Atlantic Southeast run coming in early summer. So yeah, it's shaping up to be busier a year than last, at least, which is great. I'd always like to be playing more places, but yeah, it's been a good year so far.
Yeah, there's just that energy when you play live, like you were saying. The band follows you, the audience is kind of is engaged in what you're doing, and it's just a whole vibe. I love it.
Totally.
With some of your lessons, are you still teaching lessons?
Yeah, I'm doing a decent amount of that, and doing also have all the instructional packages through TrueFire and pick up
Right.
music and a lot of that out, where those have been great, putting those together over the past few years. Did the latest project with those, did a bunch of the song lessons, which was interesting, learning some classic blues tunes note for note. But yeah, have a bunch of that, and have some things in the works too.
When you were learning some of these classic blues songs note for note, what was the most challenging one? I mean, because it's easy to get into, the blues is basic, 1-4-5. What was the most challenging blues song that you learned?
Without a doubt, it was, I forget the tune, but it was an Albert Collins tune. Because they wanted it in standard tuning. You can't do it. Right. Like I had to put a disclaimer of this is an approximation if you want to sound kind of like it. That was by far the hardest. The Albert King stuff is always a challenge just because of the tuning and the gauge of strings. Like he'd do bends on the high E string that you're either Stevie-fying it and doing, instead of like a major third bend, a whole step and kind of step and a half, or you're going to a different string set to like the B string. So it's a give or take there. And then I did Thrill Is Gone, and that was really, really challenging because the intro solo, not bad at all. But those later solos in the song, the mix, the strings come up so much that a lot of those notes, it's hard to hear the whole line. Like you can get kind of the general idea of it, but it's hard to get it note for note.
Yeah, that's crazy. Well, Seth, if people are interested in listening or taking some lessons, they can go to your website. It looks like you have a page, SethRosenbloom.com/lessons. You can check out some of Seth's stuff with TrueFire. And then you also said, was it Pickup Music?
Pickup Music, did a bunch of stuff with them as well, yeah.
Awesome. Go check those two places out if you want to take from Seth. I've watched quite a few of his videos on both of those platforms, and they are fantastic. So,
thank you very much. Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, those were all fun to put together.
Well, Seth, thank you so much for coming on to the Guitar Freaks podcast. If you guys can check out his website, go download his album, and if you are in his area, go watch him perform in Boston, New York. He will rock your socks off.
Thank you very much. Appreciate you having me.
Thanks, Seth. Thanks for listening to the Guitar Freaks podcast. You can download some free guitar charts and free guitar tools in the episode notes. Click the link and get some free stuff. Rock on.